Tonight on Land Speculation, we are going to do a deep dive into a wacky and wild 24 hours that have transpired in the nation of Venezuela. Of course, 24 hours ago, Venezuela had a ruler, Nicolás Maduro, and now it does not. And the future for Venezuela is highly uncertain. But what a 24 hours it has been in Venezuela. Explosions over the city of Caracas, a fort north of the city that was basically obliterated in a crazy whole thing that went down over the course of last night, and comments from Donald Trump, and of course now lots of questions about what happens next. And we're going to dig into the parallels. Nicolás Maduro and Saddam Hussein, and Venezuela and Iraq. Is this an Iraq-style boondoggle the U.S. is getting itself involved into, or is it something wholly different and maybe in which we have learned some lessons? All of that is stuff we're going to try to unpack here as best we can over the course of tonight's episode on Land Speculation. Welcome, guys.
That would be weird.
Let's see. I eat bars of soap for breakfast. I love bars of soap. After midnight, things get weird. Quack, quack.
Oh no.
Let it go. Let it go. Cock.
I like that one.
Quack, 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 quack. Come on, ducks. All right, and welcome back to Land Speculation on YouTube, where, of course, tonight we are digging into the big news story of the last 24 hours, a news story that sprang up out of the blue, which is the overnight capture last night of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro by the United States. And I guess we'll dig into what exactly has happened to him and everything else that transpired. Of course, we went live when we woke up in the middle of the night last night to see this as the headline, and I would say my eyes popped out of their sockets when I saw it. Like the start of the Russia-Ukraine conflict back in 2022, it was something that I knew was percolating and had doubts as to whether or not it would actually happen. And it happened, and it happened rapidly, very much in the style of Donald Trump's stuff, as has been the case this round of his administration. Welcome, guys. Jeanette, Quiet Castle, Holly. You guys are the medal winners here tonight. Congratulations. Welcome to Land Speculation. Arctic Cockwe also with us. Marky 129, Lurky 0529, and let's see, Puffy the Swedish Fish also is here as well. Welcome again, guys. Land Speculation on YouTube here. It's late. I wasn't sure if we were going to go live tonight or save some of this stuff for Monday, as we've been accumulating a little bit of an understanding of everything going on in Venezuela. And look, the reality is this stuff is changing fast, and we got to get out there and talk about it because there's a lot to make sense of here. I was asking the question earlier on about exactly what people's sentiments are on this. We posted a post on the Land Speculation channel. Initial reaction to the U.S. actions in Venezuela. So far, 62% of the respondents saying great. Socialist Venezuela was a bad actor and needed to fall, but also some trepidation here. Some people saying, no, we need to be focused on the U.S. first and not other countries. Others horrified by this incursion onto what was presumably a sovereign country, a kind of invasion of the sort that, I think reminds some people of Iraq. And I think all around, perhaps a bit of trepidation about the scale of nation building and the realities of what that entails. Donald Trump, for the entire time he's been in politics, has been largely an anti-interventionist when it comes to foreign policy. And here he is now wading deep into something. And what that is, we're going to dig a little bit into and try to unpack here tonight. So, again, 24 hours like none of us had any. This was like the glint of a dream maybe in somebody's eye, but not something that anybody thought was real. We were sitting peaceably in our beds. We were listening to Taylor Swift, and we were, I don't know, was anybody listening to Taylor Swift last night when this happened? Was anybody listening to Taylor Swift while this happened? This is Nicolás Maduro and his wife. Obviously, the two were basically captured together. And most of the imagery so far has been of Nicolás Maduro himself. And he obviously is the more consequential figure here because he, of course, was the president of Venezuela, the successor to Hugo Chavez since 2013, and a socialist leader through and through, allegedly a corrupt leader in Venezuela. But he was captured along with his wife, and so I figured we should show an image of her here. So there she is there on the left, Nicolás Maduro's wife. And yeah, this is him in happier days, I suppose, for him, back when he was fully in charge of the country, which is basically how he went to bed last night, although I think there were some inklings or some murmurs that there was at least an understanding that maybe something was afoot, because a week ago Donald Trump asked Nicolás Maduro, supposedly, allegedly, to step down, and he didn't. And, as much as it seemed like maybe in some ways Maduro was cooperating with Trump, or at least trying to not get on his bad side, in other ways, Donald Trump certainly not satisfied with the acquiescence of the Venezuelan leader to U.S. demands. Of course, Venezuela has been a fixation point of the U.S. for the last several weeks. And where this came from, why it truly arose, I guess we'll never really know. But based on what I know about Donald Trump as like a global, century-long chess player moving around the pieces on the risk board, it's a combination of things here. Venezuela, the most oil-rich nation on the earth. Venezuela, a country that I guess has been responding sort of at the crossroads of drug trafficking and illegal immigration movement into the United States. Venezuela home to gangs and bad actors. Venezuela for 25, 30 years, a bastion of South American socialism and the collapse of a once prosperous economy. If I were Donald Trump and I looked out at the landscape of countries around the world and which ones America needs to be competitive in the 21st century, I think it stands to good reason that you would look out and you see Venezuela there and you're like, that is a country that probably should be more in the U.S. pocket than it is, and for some reason it's not. And Donald Trump took action here, facing uphill political wins of his own. I saw the generic ballot, 16 points in favor of the Democrats for 2026 midterms. Donald Trump rolled the dice big time here in Venezuela, and now we have like a whole new ball game, a whole new issue at the top of the list a whole new thing for protests and all kinds of stuff. And in short order, Donald Trump made this like it was actually a very complex operation in Venezuela that happened last night, involving some 150 plus U.S. military vehicles and lots of personnel and lots of planning pulled off nearly flawlessly. This is one of the most amazing military operations, so it seems, pulled off in recent military memory. The fact that no U.S. troops were lost in this is, when you start looking into the details of all of this, is absolutely unbelievable, given how many parts and pieces were involved and how much direct conflict on Venezuelan soil was involved in capturing Maduro and his wife and taking out, I guess, the regime for now. Pretty crazy thing. With, I guess, military planes that landed from an aircraft carrier. The planes landed, helicopters took off, helicopters went to this fort. Maduro was camped out, hiding out at this fort rather than his main presidential palace. The U.S. military was able to successfully invade the fort, defeat its security barricades using aerial bombardment, and then basically make sort of a ground invasion via helicopter, and then troops moving in to this safe house where Maduro was staying. They were able to basically batter down the door, take out the security personnel in the house, invade the house, find Nicolás Maduro, who by that point was fleeing. He had bodyguards all around him the U.S. had to take out. He was trying to make his way into a bunker in the house. He didn't make it all the way into the bunker in the house. It looked like he almost was going to close the door of the bunker, but the U.S. troops intervened, forced the door open, and captured Maduro, absconded he and his wife out of the house, got them back into a helicopter, got them back to an aircraft carrier, got planes off the aircraft carrier, back to a base in Puerto Rico, and then back to the United States. What an operation. In the meantime, they had to bomb air bases and anti-aircraft fortresses all over Venezuela. Like, the fact that they were able to pull that off without any real any troops being lost is absolutely unbelievable. How this all went down. And this is, I guess, a little bit of the imagery here. So these are some of the aircraft, I guess, that were used in this. I guess this is at a military base in Puerto Rico, although with the landscape you can't really tell exactly where it is. But there was an aircraft carrier, the Iwo Jima, that was placed in the ocean outside of Venezuela. And that was basically home base for the staging of this operation, as best I understand it at this point. So aircraft took off from the Iwo Jima. They landed somewhere in Venezuela. The helicopters came in. They took off. They landed again on this base. And this is, I guess, some of the footage of some of the explosions that were happening actually on this military base there in Venezuela. And pretty darn crazy stuff when you look at these images of kind of how this went down. I mean, like, these are explosions they had to make happen before they could send in any ground troops. They had to take out, I guess, the kind of peripheral installations, the security at the edge of the base. So I was spending some time kind of digging in to the layout of this base, trying to figure out what the hell was going on with it. I still don't know that I really have a particularly good sense of exactly what was happening at this base. But I guess maybe we can try to pull this up here real quick. If we can find it. Let's see. We'll try to, let me see, guys. Give me a second here. We'll try to pull up the world here. We'll turn off our slides here for a second. We'll turn on the world. Okay, there is our world. Look at that. It is the world. And of course, this went down in Venezuela. So aircraft carrier in Puerto Rico. We're in Venezuela here. We're in the capital city of Caracas. And I don't know a ton about the city of Caracas, but it looks like a pretty intensive major city there in Venezuela. Obviously, I mean, it's the capital. Very high intensity urbanization there in Caracas, and a variety of airports and military bases and hospitals and all the kind of stuff you would expect here in a capital city. And then you go to the top of this mountain here, and you get to this fort that I guess is referred to as Fort Tuna or Fuerte Tuna or something. But it reads like Fort Tuna. And I don't know, maybe they have like flying fish at the top of the mountain. And it's a pretty darn big installation. This fort is enormous. And I guess, based on some of the images that we have seen, this is all where this seems to have focused kind of on this part of the fort. But there's a lot of barracks and things like that at the fort. Lots of munitions and all kinds of stuff. And a whole bunch of it got bombed. And what house Maduro was specifically staying at, I have not yet really been able to fully figure out. I'm continuing to try to parse into this. But anyway, pretty crazy stuff. And you're like way at the top of the mountain here. So getting to that without being detected by anti-aircraft and things like that is pretty darn impressive. So anyway, this is I guess some of the imagery that has been made available here at the fort. You can see this is kind of some of the barracks and stuff. And then some of the other imagery, I guess, as this went down, as this transpired, you can see where U.S. aerial bombardments took out massive portions of this fort. And you can see like just stuff just looking totally obliterated here. And here's some more images, just like big chunks of this, just completely obliterated. And if I ever get access to like really the full details of exactly how this all went down and what they were going for and what they were trying to destroy, I'll be very curious. But clearly, a heavily fortified fort they had to kind of barge their way into, overcome the security barricades, get to the point they could get into this house, defeat its security, and then manage to pull Maduro and his wife out of the house, get them back out onto helicopters and get the helicopters safely out of the country and back onto the aircraft carrier. Word is there's also a big kind of like, well, they had to take out like a whole nother fort. There's two big forts there in Caracas, as best I can understand. They had to take out like an entire one of them in order for this to be pulled off, and it all happened in the span of like an hour or two. Started with some of the aerial bombardments. The whole mission went down in like about half an hour. This is the palace, I guess, where Maduro normally would have been staying. And he was not staying at his main palace here. This building right here is his main palace. For some reason, he wasn't staying at his main palace. And why not? I guess he may have understood something was afoot here. So he was already staying at a safe house. He just wasn't able to make it out of the main part of his safe house into his bunker in time, although, as Donald Trump so inelegantly described, if he had tried to go to the bunker, the U.S. would have taken out that door in 47 seconds. That's what Donald Trump said, that they would take out the door in 47 seconds. Why 47 and not 48 or 15? I don't know. But it looks like a nice enough palace. But these are some of the images of the destruction in Venezuela. Clearly a lot of stuff taken out in aerial bombardments. Venezuela today picking up the pieces. There are some AMAs out there from people in Venezuela that were witness to some of this. This is, I guess, one of the people that was running down the street in Venezuela as the booms went off. The power went out in a giant section of Venezuela. They tend to have rolling blackouts because the country is economically and infrastructurally such a disaster right now. That's just kind of a normal thing, and the U.S. was still able to make this all go down successfully anyway. But not without scaring the bejesus out of the Venezuelan people with all these booms and all this fire. Here's another, I guess, anti-aircraft vehicle that was bombed the smithereens out of there in Caracas. And this is now let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is the seventh country the U.S. has bombed, that the U.S. has bombed since Donald Trump took office. So Donald Trump, the pacifist president, the president who's going to be America first. America will no longer meddle in the affairs of foreign nations. Donald Trump went in and he has meddled. Donald Trump has meddled in the affairs of 7 countries around the world here in his second term. And Donald Trump has been known in his second term here for making fast work of complex issues, and so it is the case for Venezuela. They didn't dick around on this. They went and they took out the leader of Venezuela instantaneously. Could they have killed him in the moment? Absolutely. Why did they want to bring him back alive? Interesting question. So Donald Trump no longer the peace president. Here are the images of Maduro as he was being transported, I guess first by helicopter, then by plane to an aircraft carrier, and then from there to a base to a bigger aircraft that eventually deposited him in New York. It looked like kind of more of a passenger grade plane that eventually took him, although he seemed to be blindfolded the entire voyage. And by the time he actually got off the plane, it was quite dark. And so, I'm sure he was pretty disoriented, but he had a lot of people, I guess, shepherding him. This is the one pretty badass photo of him that seems to keep being circulated. And this is him, I guess, shortly after being absconded. Here he is. I guess he was wearing whatever he was wearing, at night to go to bed. And I assume they didn't let him get any further dressed. Looks a little stained. He's wearing like a blindfold and headphones that they put on him, I guess, to protect him from the noise. And then I guess they gave him a bottle of water to be in some kind of accordance with international law. But he sure has squeezed the hell out of that bottle of water. And I assume I'm not the only one who, looking at these images, is kind of like, you look faintly and you're like, boy, that looks an awful lot like the disoriented images of Saddam Hussein when the U.S. pulled him out of that rat hole in 2003. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the similarities here between Venezuela and Iraq, and between Maduro and Saddam. But man, it does look a little eerie. So this is where Maduro has been taken, this prison in Brooklyn. And I was reading a little bit about this prison where Maduro was taken. This is the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. And what a party that place is. This is a hell of a place. United States Federal Administrative Detention Center in the Sunset Park neighborhood of Brooklyn, which coincidentally is not all that far from where I lived in Brooklyn back when I lived in Brooklyn. So this is a big-time federal prison there in I guess it's in New York City. Why they opted for that, I guess I'm not quite sure, but this happens to be the prison where Sean Diddy Combs has been incarcerated. He's one of the inmates there. Lots of very exciting people have spent time in this prison. Sam Bankman-Fried. 25-year sentence there. We also have, a variety of rappers. R. Kelly served a 31-year sentence. I guess he was there on child abuse, kidnapping, bribery, and sex trafficking charges. Fetty Wap serving time there. Let's see. Al Sharpton served 90 days there, but that was back in 2001. He's not there anymore. Michael Cohen, you guys remember that guy? He served time there in this same prison. Ghislaine Maxwell served a 20-year, I guess is serving a 20-year sentence, and was transferred to Tallahassee in July of 2020 from this prison. So she's not there anymore. But she was. Diddy Combs is in this prison. Luigi Mangione is being held in this prison right now. And now Nicolás Maduro. So, some kind of a party going down in this facility right now between Diddy, Sam Bankman-Fried, and Luigi Mangione, and Nicolás Maduro, and the ghost, I guess, of Ghislaine Maxwell. What a good time it must be in that prison. That's like a serious-ass federal prison. And as you can see, there are Venezuelan protesters outside. I guess sympathetic protesters to the regime. They're outside. And all over America, you've had protests popping up today. Like Americans who are really angry that America has opted to advance its own interests by taking out the socialist leader of Venezuela. And quite, I should say, the juxtaposition, just as Mamdani has taken office in New York City just in the last couple days. Mamdani took office and gave a rousing victory address in which, on his inauguration day, in which he praised. He said that we will now do away with, what did he say, the frigidity of rugged individualism, and now give way to the warmth of collectivism. That was his language there on his inauguration day in New York City. And in turn, Donald Trump has, I guess, declared that Venezuela is going to see the opposite trajectory happen, where the warmth of collectivism will now give way to whatever we install, I suppose, or try to install in Venezuela. But Maduro now is in prison. He will now face some kind of charges, and now I guess the pressure is on for the U.S. to figure out how to convict him of these charges: crimes against humanity, extrajudicial killings, torture, sexual violence, arbitrary detention, enforced disappearances, political persecution, imprisonment, or severe deprivation of liberty of adversaries, inhumane acts causing great suffering, murder, abuse of detainees, suppression of peaceful assembly, targeting civilians, and command responsibility for security forces abuses. These are some of the things that comprise the body of stuff that Nicolás Maduro will presumably be charged with. The U.S. has got to figure out exactly what those charges are, and it shouldn't be particularly hard. The opposition party leader in Venezuela was given the Nobel Peace Prize in 2025. Of course, that is until the U.S. decides to depose the former leader. But there's a lot of bad stuff that Nicolás Maduro has done, not the least of which is engaging in, presumably, allegedly, significant fraud, both to become the president and to sustain his role as the president of Venezuela. He became president as Hugo Chávez's hand-picked successor. You guys know the story. We've covered it a couple times here now on Land Speculation. Venezuela was a tremendously prosperous country for a long time. As of the 1950s, Venezuela was the fourth wealthiest country in the world by GDP per capita. Venezuela had a very prosperous era for many years, but started to see hard times emerge in the 1980s and the 1990s, and Venezuelans revolted against capitalism. In the 1990s, they elected a kind of a strong-arm socialist, hardcore socialist government led by Hugo Chávez. Hugo Chávez served for about 15 years, and that gave way to his handpicked successor, Maduro, in 2013. Meanwhile, Venezuela was undergoing like a tremendous economic collapse, in addition to a collapse of its internal freedoms. The nearly infinite inflation is something we've talked about a fair number of times. Nicolás Maduro was named the interim president in 2013. That gave way to a formal election, and he was elected fully the president in 2013 under very questionable circumstances. And as he was elected, even then, there were all kinds of suspicions that maybe this thing had not been on the up and up. There was a refusal to audit the votes. There was extensive control by Maduro's party of the electoral authorities. There was use of state security to intimidate voters and protesters. And there was mass allegation of irregularities and coercion of the election. And this is the case in elections across Latin and South America when it comes to some of these socialist regimes. It's part of the reason why when people start getting all antsy about the security and viability of U.S. elections, like having the ability to have like free and fair elections is a big deal. And in a lot of South America, they don't. And Maduro's, believe it or not, people in Venezuela have not been all that happy with the extensive inflation in Venezuela that has basically rendered it impossible to hang on to any money, and the utter collapse of the economy. And so Maduro probably was en route to lose the 2024 election, but he didn't. But he didn't because of a lot of questionable things. There was no transparency to the vote count. There were no precinct-level vote tallies published. The declared victory margin by Maduro did not match the credible vote tallies. There was a premature announcement of victory by Maduro in 2024 over the opposition party before the full set of results were counted. There were inconsistent results versus the independent data, like by substantial margins. There were tallies conducted from the actual voting machines that suggested that Edmundo Gonzalez, the opposition, had won the margin by a substantial margin, but those tallies were blocked from public view by the regime. There was the manipulation of electoral authorities. There was the suppression of opposition competition. Basically, opponents were not allowed to run in the election. The very popular Maria Corina Machado was disqualified from the race. Of course, Maduro loyalists controlled all of the institutions within the country, including the security forces, enabling the certification of results that almost assuredly were incorrect, even when they conflicted with the independent data. And, of course, there was tremendous repression of information after the election, in which the government cracked down on protests and detained opposition members, which made it very difficult for anybody to contest the results of the election, even though it was pretty blatantly a bullshit election in 2024 in which Maduro was re-elected. And so that has led a lot of people, of course, to say Maduro was not a free and fair president upon his election. By the way, guys, you're watching Land Speculation here on YouTube as we do a bit of a deep dive into everything that has gone down in Venezuela over the last 24 hours. If you wouldn't mind dropping a like and a subscribe on the video. Those likes help us out with YouTube. The subscribes help you guys know when we're on. Just in case you forgot, or you're like, boy, I really like that land guy, but I forgot to like the video. Please like the video. Please subscribe to our channel. Please join our Discord. That link is in the description. If you have not joined our Discord, it's there. Like, you can join it right now if you want to. And the Duck Fund is also linked there in the description. That has the link to our Buy Me a Coffee link if you want to help support the stream. Of course, we have super chats on here just in case anybody wants to help support the stream. And while you're at it, guys, if you wouldn't mind dropping like comments. We try to do these lives in a very interactive way here on our channel. I love chatting with you guys. Liberty Lover OK, thanks for dropping the like on the video. We try to make our streams interactive. Sometimes we do deep dives because we just have to puke out as much information as we possibly can. So sometimes we're a little less interactive, but we do try to make the live chats very active. But YouTube actually doesn't measure us by the live chats. YouTube measures us based on comments on our videos. So if you wouldn't mind, drop in the periodic comment on the actual video after you watch. Those help us out as well. So all that stuff, I know it's a lot to ask for, but we do appreciate it. We very much appreciate it. Obviously, there's like a lot of stuff for us to unpack here around Venezuela just over the last 24 hours. There will be more in coming days too. So you want to make sure you're subscribed as we delve deeper and deeper and deeper into all of this. Okay, this is like a weird thing for the U.S. to be taking out a foreign leader at all. It's a very weird thing for the U.S. to be literally capturing alive the foreign leader of a country. Like, that's a pretty crazy thing. That does not happen very often in the 21st century. When I awoke to this in the middle of the night last night, it was like, Holy crap, that is a crazy thing. That is not something like, it is one thing to go, take out a leader of something, but to capture alive a foreign head of state, just to me, like it screams of something of like the ancient past, of the weak regimes of like the 1700s, the 1800s. Not something that happens very frequently today. Can you guys imagine if Donald Trump were captured alive by a foreign adversary and like absconded to a prison in their country? It's almost impossible to imagine. In fact, we asked a poll question on our channel here earlier today about that, and what people thought is likely would likely be the reaction of people if that were the case. Like, are we so fractured as a country that people think that Democrats, if Donald Trump were captured by the Chinese and absconded to another country, to a Chinese prison, like would the Democrats be happy that somebody had removed Donald Trump? Or would there be cohesive outrage within this country that a foreign nation had captured the U.S. president, even if it was somebody we vehemently disagreed with? Would we have that sense of solidarity as a nation? Certainly in the past we would, but would we today? And, so far you guys seem to feel like the Democrats, at least based on the votes in so far on that poll question, would simply be happy that Donald Trump had been removed from office at all, which is a pretty sad state of American politics. I would hope that no matter who the U.S. president is, if a foreign nation came and captured them and took them alive to a foreign prison, that we would have the solidarity as a nation to all express collective outrage about it. If Joe Biden were captured, like, boy, I would hope that we are still cohesive enough that we would have that good sense, rather than to literally be siding with foreign adversaries over the duly elected leaders of our own country. But in Venezuela, I guess people were so outraged by the 2024 election, people are so fed up with the state of affairs, Nicolás Maduro's alleged corruption and whatnot, that the opposition party expressed support for the United States in having taken Venezuela out. The international reactions were very mixed. The bad countries, the Irans, the Colombias, all these countries were condemning it. Of course, many of the other countries like Chile, France, they supported U.S. action in taking out Maduro. Mixed response. I put a picture here of, this is 1870, when Louis Napoleon, who was the head of state in France, not the original Napoleon, but the subsequent, he was like a nephew or something of the original Napoleon, took power in 1852, I believe. He took power 1851, 1852. He declared himself emperor, took over the military in 1870, commanded himself into battle, got himself captured by, I believe it was the Prussians, which is a pretty damn embarrassing thing if you're the head of state of a country. It's one thing to get taken out, like killed, but it is a whole nother thing, a whole nother level of embarrassment to allow yourself to literally get captured by another country. And that is something that happened occasionally. Back in the old days, 1700s, the 1800s, that is not something that tends to happen these days. You think that no matter how vulnerable a country is, that heads of state are usually pretty secure in their enclaves, in their bunkers, protected by their military, protected by their bodyguards. It is very rare. Like, Russia was not able to take out President Zelensky in Ukraine. But here we are, like in one mission, the U.S. was able to take out Maduro in his safe house at a military base in Venezuela. It's a crazy thing that this happened. And something that just feels like it is of a past era, something that doesn't happen very often anymore. Of course, the closest perhaps parallel in recent vintage, some people were bringing up in comments on our video from earlier this morning, or I guess last morning, U.S. taking out bin Laden. Of course, we killed bin Laden. But we captured Saddam Hussein alive from a rat hole in Iraq. So after the U.S. invaded Iraq, after Saddam fled power and was basically on the run for like 7 months in Iraq, in December of 2003, the U.S. found Saddam Hussein lying at the base of a rat hole somewhere in Iraq and was able to pull him out alive, imprison him for about 3 years before executing him in 2006. And if you've never watched any of the documentaries about the interrogation of Saddam Hussein, trying to get him to ultimately admit to some of his crimes, it's a pretty amazing thing. The process of trying to engage with a person like Saddam Hussein and sort of play mind games with him. He's somebody that likes to play mind games himself, trying to get information out of Saddam Hussein. It's a pretty crazy thing, how they managed to ultimately do that. The mind games that you can play on a prisoner are pretty crazy. Anyway, this is a diagram of the rat hole where Saddam Hussein was captured. And I was just thinking, boy, if that's where you're living, can you imagine the claustrophobia? You can't even sit up, much less stand up. And man, to even get out of there, that would be a hard thing to get out of if you're not a super limber, flexible person. And it's dark. Looks like he had a fan and an air vent possibly in this rat hole where he was hiding. And the U.S. managed to find him there. I mean, man, the U.S. intel to be able to figure out where these people are and dig them out of these holes. Pretty crazy stuff. And I don't think Saddam Hussein was expecting to be captured, and certainly the look on his face was pretty darn, made him mad. You go from being the head of state of a major country to this, to living in this condition, then being captured in this condition. Pretty darn crazy. Pretty darn crazy. And certainly Maduro, he had a good run there. He was in charge of a large country for a long time, and now he's sitting in a prison. And, what's going to happen? I mean, the opposition leader wants to be in charge. Trump says no dice on that yet. The deputy that I guess was, second in command to Maduro is in theory now, I guess, in charge. Says she'll cooperate with the United States, but also is blustering that she won't. This is a hard thing to replace a sitting leader. This whole thing sort of has these similarities to the beginning of the Iraq War in 2003, when the U.S. had given Saddam a 48-hour ultimatum to turn over his weapons of mass destruction. Saddam Hussein didn't do it, and so George W. Bush didn't bluff, went in and invaded Iraq, and the rest is history. The U.S. was able to topple Iraq very quickly, militarily, and then engaged in 20 years of trying to figure out what to do there. Or I guess about 10 years. 10 years in Iraq, 20 years in Afghanistan, but who's counting? And this whole thing kind of feels like that, because now it's the last time we invaded a sovereign state was Iraq. And that felt awfully naive in hindsight, that we had done that without a plan really of what happened next. And here it feels again like we don't really have a plan quite for what happens next. I think when Donald Trump stepped to the podium this morning, a lot of people were like, you better have a plan, Donnie. Hoping that he would get up there with a very clear plan of what happens next. But Donald Trump didn't utter a particularly clear plan of what is going to happen next. He said the U.S. will control things for a while. In his sort of vernacular language. And how exactly that happens, we're not really sure. These are the images of shock and awe in Iraq in 2003. The night sky of Baghdad being lit up. I remember watching this live, and it was pretty darn crazy. And explosions over Venezuela, over Caracas, not quite the same thing. Not the same thing. We didn't invade the country, but we did carry out a whole lot of targeted attacks. And there were bombs bursting in air over Caracas last night. And now Venezuela is without a formal leader, with a vacuum of power. Who knows quite what happens now? Venezuela, a country of around 29 million people. It's a big country, one of the most significant countries outside of Brazil. They're in South America. And, there's, again, some similarities here. Venezuela and the country of Iraq. Iraq, a little bit bigger. Iraq's about 46 million people when we invaded Iraq. Either one is a hard country to manage if it really becomes the U.S.'s responsibility to manage the infrastructure and the peace of that nation for very long. you can expect it will be about as unwieldy as Iraq was. And for all the things the U.S. military is very good at, and that the U.S. State Department is good at, the reality is not so good at nation building or nation occupying. A lot of similarities, though. Both countries had a heyday that was better than the present. In both countries, the leader, Maduro and Saddam, had an iron grip on things in many ways, but also had seen the country deteriorate in many ways as well, mostly economically. Venezuela, very, very, very prosperous back in the 1950s. Oil wealth has long sustained the country. And into the 1970s, 1980s, Venezuela, extremely prosperous, a paradise of sorts in northern South America, having given way to the infinite inflation and bad, bad, bad scenes. Meanwhile, Iraq's heyday was much, much longer in the distant past. The 800s, circa around 855 AD, was the peak of Iraq's heyday, when it was basically the head of a caliphate that was the most powerful empire in the world, one of the 4 or 5 most powerful empires that has ever existed. Then the bastion of the world's intellectual power, the city of Baghdad, the most prosperous capital in the world, giving way to what by 2003 was a shell of itself. Still a powerful country militarily by Middle East standards, but no match for the military might of the United States. Both countries have a lot of natural resources that they weren't being very friendly with to the United States. Iraq, a major oil producer, one of the 5 or 6 most oil-rich countries in the world. Venezuela, even oil-richer. But interestingly, since Maduro has been in charge in Venezuela, Venezuela has produced less oil than Iraq. Since the U.S. invaded Iraq in 2003, Iraq has steadily increased its oil production as infrastructure was built and expanded. Venezuela, meanwhile, since the early 2000s, has reduced its oil production as infrastructure has fallen into disrepair and the regime has become hostile to Western Western nations. Venezuela increasingly was becoming buddy-buddy with Russia and China, and I don't think Donald Trump liked that very much. The notion that a country that rich in oil was producing that little oil, just sitting on a gold mine, I think was very irritating to Donald Trump. Oil, of course, continues to be the lifeblood of the world. There are many, many rare earth metals and minerals and natural resources that are valuable, but oil in particular, extremely, extremely valuable. Known oil reserves by country, Venezuela has now surpassed Saudi Arabia by a good deal. Iraq, there you can see number 5 on the list. But Venezuela, the most oil-rich country in the world, located geographically proximate to the United States. If you're Donald Trump, the chess player, you're looking at that saying, boy, we should, that should be like our lifeline of oil. Like we should have that oil. That's in our hemisphere. The Monroe Doctrine says we should control that. The Donroe Doctrine, as Donald Trump has now termed it, says, now we will. We will try to control Venezuela's oil, and unlike perhaps past regimes in the United States, unlike past administrations that would have pussyfooted around the issue, Donald Trump is making no bones about the fact that our stated objective here is a mere power play to try to get part of Venezuela's oil. You can see on the global map of oil, the countries in the darkest colors are the countries with the most oil. Those also happen to be some of the countries Donald Trump has talked the most about. Saudi Arabia, Canada, Iran, Iraq, Russia, and then there's Venezuela. Venezuela there with Saudi Arabia, the 2 most potent oil-rich countries in the world. And now we're going to go take it. Donald Trump has said he's going to go set up U.S. Oil companies to try to build out the infrastructure of Venezuela so they can pump more oil out of the ground and presumably create a cheap pipeline to the United States. This may seem crazy, the notion of the U.S. stepping in and bringing our oil companies to Venezuela, telling them, like, go figure it out. Go take the oil, bring it back to the United States. You know, we can do sort of a trade here. They get the infrastructure to extract it. We get the oil. Sounds crazy. ExxonMobil, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, these companies will be basically thrust into Venezuela to build out the oil infrastructure. This is not so crazy. This is something the U.S. has done in the past. A lot of people don't realize Saudi Arabia, before they figured out how to extract their oil, didn't know how to extract their own oil. This is Franklin Roosevelt meeting on the deck of an aircraft carrier with the then head of Saudi Arabia in, I believe it was like 1936, somewhere in there, 33, 36, somewhere in there. Franklin Roosevelt met with the Saudis because even then the U.S. realized that our domestic stockpile of oil can't last us forever and that we need allies. So the U.S., despite being culturally worlds away from Saudi Arabia, made a deal with them that we would extract their oil, we would bring our technology, we would help them figure out how to get that oil out of the ground. In turn, we would take some of that oil cheap, and they would reap the benefits, that they would become wealthier than ever before. And Saudi Arabia has enjoyed a century of astronomical wealth sitting on that oil. And the U.S. is what helped unlock it. Donald Trump, I believe, sees something here for Venezuela akin to that. That if Venezuela doesn't know how to get the oil out of the ground or is unwilling to get the oil out of the ground, we're going to go do it for him. It's a very resource-hungry view of international conflict, but it's also transparent in a way that sometimes we try to hide. I mean, the reality is, like, countries compete over resources. That's what international stuff is all about, frankly, a lot of the time. And so here we go. Here we go. The U.S. is going to go take Venezuela's oil. Donald Trump has already stunned reporters on a few instances of the last few weeks when they asked him, like, what are you going to do with the oil? Donald Trump's like, we're going to keep it. Reporters don't know what to say to that. They're used to the U.S. putting on this facade of benevolence. But no, Donald Trump, a resource-greedy president, going to go into Venezuela and take their oil. In the meantime, we'll run the country, says Donald Trump. We're going to control it. How? Unclear. Donald Trump has basically said, like, Marco Rubio is now going to be the head of Venezuela. Have fun, Marco. You thought you didn't know what you were getting into when you became head of the State Department. Marco Rubio is now going to go into Venezuela and run the country. So they say. So, there's Donald Trump. What happens next? Again, I think people were expecting some clearer answers this morning. Mostly it was just a victory lap for the mission, which is very impressive mission, but we'll run the country for a country this large is a pretty darn crazy statement. I mean, it's a big-time statement. And already some trepidation out there. Trump rolls the dice on nation building with vow to run Venezuela. Yeah, no kidding. I mean, that's not an easy thing. But here we go. Again, like Venezuela's deputy leadership, military leadership, kind of coalescing, I guess, sort of in a way that was like allied with Maduro. But Donald Trump was asked about the opposition leader and whether or not she could be in charge. And he said, quote unquote, I think it'd be a very tough thing for her to be the leader. She doesn't have the support within or the respect within the country. Venezuelans in July 2024 elected Edmundo Gonzalez. Like, the genuine election was probably for Edmundo Gonzalez, not the actual woman that is Maria Corina Machado, who is the current opposition leader. And Donald Trump doesn't think that she can lead. I don't know why, but he doesn't think that she can be installed. Opposition leaders in Venezuela had called for people to take to the streets and urge the military to abandon the old regime. Today we are prepared to enforce our mandate and take power, said Machado. I think she was a little disappointed that Donald Trump didn't kingmake her right out of the gate. Donald Trump claiming this could take a year, that the U.S. is going to be in charge of Venezuela for a year. And that timetable relative to the 2026 midterms is pretty interesting. This is going to be the issue that dominates 2026 here. Okay, in response, some other takes here. The term bizarre doesn't even begin to describe what we just heard. Donald Trump's press conference on Saturday, where he laid out plans for the U.S. to run Venezuela until there's a transition of power. I genuinely hope Secretary Rubio and others clarify this unacceptable situation. I don't know who Borelli is. He's a supporter of Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado. Oil companies do not operate in a vacuum, and we are years from significant volume increase, said Borelli. Venezuela is broke and needy, but it is not about to surrender to absurd whims. So the contentions here that we are a long way from getting easy Venezuelan oil, that the oil companies need security in order to operate. Marco Rubio is not really prepared to be the head of state of Venezuela. The U.S. military potentially may be on the ground to try to shore up peace in Venezuela. In the meantime, who the hell knows what happens? Donald Trump refusing to endorse the opposition party. Meanwhile, the allied figures, I guess the allies of Venezuela, of Maduro, I guess claiming that they're going to be in power here. So this could get sticky really fast. There is some precedent, historically, for the U.S. occupying countries once the leader had been taken out. Perhaps the closest parallel of this is after Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his bunker at the end of World War II. There was a period of transition. Immediately after Adolf Hitler committed suicide, one of his deputies, in fact, the deputy that he had appointed in his will, established a temporary government in Germany. That temporary government in Germany basically existed only so long as to complete the terms of surrender to the Allied powers. And then in late 1945, the US, the UK, France, and the Soviet Union established a collective government that ruled Germany for 4 years. The US was basically in charge of Germany, along with those 3 other countries, for 4 years. And they operated by committee, ruling basically the 3rd most powerful country in the world. A lot of people don't fully realize that. A lot of people talking about the need for a Marshall Plan here for Venezuela, some kind of plan to move forward. This was not a particularly productive engagement between the U.S. and these other countries trying to run Germany in the aftermath of World War II. Almost instantaneously, the Soviets started disagreeing with the U.S., the U.K., and France. Generally, the U.S., the U.K., and France got along fairly well ruling Germany, but the Soviets were kind of a hard play. And so a lot of people don't realize that the ultimate formation of East and West Germany was basically directly the result of the disagreements between the 3 Allied powers here, French, British, and Americans, and the Soviets, who disagreed on matters of policy when it came to the future German government. East and West Germany got established as separate countries because the 4 entities trying to control Germany for 4 years in the 40s didn't agree on how to do it. And so are we in, I mean, that's not an easy thing to do. It's an expensive operation to try to rebuild the infrastructure of Germany. So are we in line for like 4 years of Marco Rubio being the head of state of Venezuela? Are we going to ultimately just conclude that like it's not even worth it to put a head of state in charge in Venezuela, where we don't have enough guarantees about how allied they actually will be with us? Who knows? Or will Venezuela actually beat Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico and Canada and Greenland to the punch here and end up actually being first in line to becoming the 51st state? Have we just acquired 30 million new Americans and a completely dysfunctional backward country with a lot of oil to be our 51st state? I mean, this is a big long-term move. This is the kind of move that a more conventional, let's say, administration would not make, but actually, like, if you look at the world as a chessboard, makes some sense. It's just a pretty crazy move to make it in the moment. The U.S. probably does need to be able to control oil in our hemisphere in order to be able to continue to reign supreme in the world in the 21st century. That Monroe Doctrine, the doctrine that the U.S. will control affairs in our Western Hemisphere, and nobody that encroaches on that will be allowed to do so. I mean, that's important when a lot of the Western Hemisphere has a lot of stuff, a lot of the resources, a lot of the rare earth metals that the U.S. needs. So Chile, countries like that. And there's a reason the U.S. has been hard at work negotiating with countries like that. The resources that we will need in the 21st century are contained within those countries, and Venezuela absolutely is one of those countries. But this is a hell of a bold, invasive move to do it like this. And when the rest of the world looks at the U.S. and is like, you're an imperial power bully that goes and randomly invades places, and the U.S. is like, nah, we did that in Iraq 20 years ago, but we don't do that anymore. Now we do. And so the rest of the world is a little suspicious of us now. Okay, when I saw this had gone down and how this went down, I thought I was the only person noticing this, and apparently I'm not the only person noticing that Nicolás Maduro looks an awful lot like Saddam Hussein. If this were reversed, if these two images were reversed, and the image on the right was what Saddam Hussein looked like in 2006, and the image on the left were what Nicolás Maduro looked like today, I would be intrigued by the various conspiracy theories, and apparently they are out there, that in fact Nicolás Maduro is Saddam Hussein, and in fact the U.S. never, I guess, actually captured Saddam Hussein, that was all a farce, and that Saddam Hussein actually somehow like escaped to Venezuela, and now he actually is the leader of Venezuela, and this was all just about the U.S. finally capturing Saddam Hussein. I didn't create this conspiracy theory. This is actually out there. There are websites that talk about this, and that were talking about this before this whole thing went down last night. The problem is, it's like aging the reverse direction. Saddam Hussein in 2003 is pictured there on the left. Nicolás Maduro today is pictured there on the right. I mean, that's not him today, that's him recently. So I guess you would have to assume that Saddam Hussein, after he left Iraq, fled to Venezuela, was able to get some kind of crazy Latin American Botox treatment that made him look about, well, let's say 40 years younger, because now 20 additional years have passed. So you have the natural aging that occurred anyway, plus the fact that he looks younger now than he did then. But there are websites that tackle this and talk about the different ways in which I guess this would have occurred, and the similarities. I didn't make this drawing. This drawing was just out there. And I don't know what these lines are supposed to mean. So apparently they both have foreheads. They both have like kind of bald spots that angle up in the same spot. Of course, they both have dark hair, dark graying hair. They both have eyes. Look at that. Eyes that look quite similar. They both have little bags under their eyes. They both have cheeks and ears that look awfully similar. They both have, of course, the signature mustaches. They both have, well, okay, apparently Maduro's forehead looks like Saddam Hussein's cheek. Maybe we took some of the fat from Saddam Hussein's cheek and we pumped it into Maduro's forehead to get rid of his wrinkles. They both have chins. Look at that. I don't know that Maduro's chin actually looks that much like Saddam Hussein's chin, but the bottom of the chins look similar. So maybe, just maybe, Saddam Hussein and Nicolás Maduro actually are the same person after all. Maybe, just maybe, Saddam Hussein actually did successfully flee Iraq in 2003 and make it to Venezuela and undergo some kind of crazy Botox procedure. And maybe, just maybe, something about this look, the black hair, the salt and pepper sprinkled into the hair, the big bushy eyebrows, the big mustache, those intense eyes, that look of a dictator, the strongman dictator look, was intriguing enough that it has compelled the U.S. to go in and take out a sitting sovereign leader of a medium-sized country twice in 23 years. And maybe, just maybe, Saddam Hussein and Nicolás Maduro are the same person. And I will leave it to you to determine whether or not that is a viable, legitimate theory that we should entertain. In the meantime, have a gander at your newest, perhaps 51st state there, Venezuela, the capital of Caracas, surrounded by Colombia, Brazil, and Guyana, French Guyana. The Venezuelan embassy today was all aflutter in Washington, D.C. Prior to today, I didn't actually know specifically where the Venezuelan embassy is, and actually it's not co-located with a lot of the other embassies. It's actually in Georgetown in D.C. It's in a kind of interesting spot. It's actually a very good location right by the Georgetown Canal. These are conspiracy signs that have been near the Venezuelan embassy for a while. No war for oil, stop the coup, hands off Venezuela, end the deadly sanctions. Today there was a bomb threat at the Venezuelan embassy here in D.C., and they had to basically clear out a large section of Georgetown. There was a lot of fear and worry that the Venezuelan embassy was going to be subject to some kind of major incident in D.C. today. We weren't able to get over there and show you that in person, but I don't know. We'll have to see if we can find some time to get over to the Venezuelan embassy and see what's going on there, because that country is now all a tatter. But maybe it's the end of all of the drug trafficking, all of the gangs, all of the illegal immigration that flows through Venezuela. Maybe it's an end to the bullshit. Maybe it's an end to the socialism. Maybe it's an end to the inflation. Maybe it's an end to Venezuela not listening to the United States. Maybe it's an end to not having access to Venezuelan oil. Or maybe, just maybe, it's just the beginning of something that's even worse. Because one of those historical lessons we learned from Iraq, of course, Iraq had come a long way downhill from its peak historically to what Saddam Hussein was ruling over in the early 2000s. But what we learned very quickly is that however bad things were there, at least they were somewhat stable under Saddam Hussein, and things got a lot more chaotic very quickly there once Saddam was no longer in power. And so whatever you think the bad condition is, it can always get worse. That's something that Americans need to be reminded of more. Because we seem to be, we treat our democracy in America like it's a football. Even though things are generally pretty good here, we treat it like, we can just kick it around and everything will just magically get better. The reality is things can always get worse. Venezuela is a bit of a hellscape now, but it can actually get worse. And all of those things that are bad that are coming out of Venezuela now could actually exacerbate even further with a vacuum of leadership. And the U.S. might have to start putting tons of money in American military investment into stabilizing the country. That's what we're going to find out. If this results in more drugs, more violence, more gangs, more instability, more inflation, more economic turmoil, 30 million angry people, oil that is uncontrolled and up for grabs, this could become very chaotic. Hopefully it won't. Hopefully Trump and his minions have a plan here. But it is the nation-building stage of the plan where things have gone awry in the past. And so pardon those who view this as a bit of a precarious time when we need some proof of concept here that Trump knows what he's doing. And maybe he does. Maybe Marco Rubio will make a great president for Venezuela. And then maybe he will make a great governor for Venezuela once Venezuela is the 51st state. All right, guys. I don't know. We should probably do an ad here. Oh, we should refresh this so that we get the actual current chat. There we go. There's our current chat. So, guys, we appreciate you hanging out with us here on Land Speculation on YouTube. We need to do an ad. So, somebody pick a number 1 through 15 here. 1 through 15. And again, guys, we're gonna figure out the other commercials, like the YouTube commercials, because I know it's it's a little annoying when those pop up here from time to time. I think we did 9 pretty recently, Calming. We'll listen to Liberty. I mean, I don't know. We should maybe I'll listen to Liberty here and do a 12 because I think we did 9 pretty darn recently on a stream, and that's I hope that's not. We'll see what we got here. Let's see what we got here. Let's see what we have in the ad universe here if I can find them. Okay, we'll try 12 first. Let's see what we got.
Help! Help! Pineapple! This is Jeanette. We need likes on this stream to help it get recommended. Help! Help! Pineapple! This is Jeanette. We need likes on this stream to help it get recommended to more people. While you are there, you can help yourself find us again by subscribing to Land Speculation's channel. You can help those around you by setting the bell to all and making sure it notifies loudly. That way, I don't need to use the safe word again.
All right, we're back on Land Speculation on YouTube. That was Jeanette. That was I've forgotten about that one. Anyway, yeah. Do what she says. That was an interesting one. Calming wanted to do. I mean, we could also do 9. Let's see what we got here on 9. We'll do 9.
Hi, everybody. This is Jeanette, moderator here on Land Speculation. Thanks for joining tonight's stream. Take a pause from quacking to peck at the thumbs up thingy. Those likes help the channel be recommended and let us know we did something likable. Land streams most weeknights, covering all kinds of interesting content. Subscribing is a great way to make sure you don't miss a moment of the action. I've gabbed enough. Let's get back to land.
Okay, that was more of Jeanette here on Land Speculation on YouTube. By the way, guys, if you have not been over to our new, I'm going to say sister channel, we've started a second channel here to post like kind of authentic, live, like the raw footage from Land's journeys around the world. Our alternate channel, Land Ducks International, is our second channel now. Join that if you haven't yet. Check it out. It's a little bit of a kind of offbeat alternative to this channel. We would love to have more folks on there. It's just getting started, like just in the last couple of weeks. It's getting started, so it's going to take a long time for that to build. But we're just getting started. There's going to be stuff almost every day there for like a long time. So Jeanette wants us to pin this. Okay, we'll try to pin the link there. Okay, we got it pinned. So yep. Go hang out there, if you feel so inclined. All right, and lots of other stuff. Like we've had a lot of like random little videos getting posted here on Land Speculation. A lot of stuff that's like in the queue for the next few days and weeks. And we got polls up right now on the channel, so go vote in the polls. We got Discord stuff going on. There's like a lot going on in the Land Speculation universe because there's a lot going on in the world universe. All right, Kobo Bunny has a music album coming out. That's cool. Congratulations, Kobo Bunny. Safe word. I don't know why people don't just use safe word as the safe word. Norman, I appreciate your kind comments in there. All right, I'm scrolling back through. I mean, we might not be able to scroll that far back, depending on how this all works. Sure, it's partly about oil, says Liberty, but the government of Venezuela was sitting on a resource that could have enriched their own citizens, but didn't. Well, they've always had, I mean, they've produced a fair amount of oil. Um, but yeah, Trump thinks they should be producing more. Yes, we did. So we macro wise, this channel has been monetized since 2008 or whenever they started that program. This channel's been monetized for a long time. We just weren't monetized from 2019 to 2025. So now that we're back monetized, there's a little bit of stuff to iron out here with the ads, but we appreciate you bearing with us here. Okay, scrolling back through the comments here. Is this CNN? No, this is not CNN. Arctic cockweed. This could be like Libya, where we just leave millions of people for worse off for the foreseeable future, and people just forget about it. Could be like that too. But we have a vested interest here. We want Libya's oil. We want Venezuela's oil more. Maduro looks like Saddam, says Jerry Carter. Well, yes, that's the point. Okay, spider holes are not the same thing as rat holes. Fair enough. What if a YouTuber captured land? For what purpose? I mean, I guess it depends who the YouTuber is and why they're doing it. And like, if it was like a really successful YouTuber, that would be kind of interesting. Let's see. The warmth of collectivism causes mass death in breadlines, says Quiet Castle. We're going to have a video coming out, I believe tomorrow, about the warmth of collectivism. Stay tuned for that. That was a pretty crazy line uttered by Mayor, I guess new Mayor, Mamdani in New York. Yeah, a lot of people on the social media is very upset about the taking out of Maduro on Reddit and on X and on Blue Sky and on TikTok and on Instagram and on platforms like that. A lot of people very upset that the U.S. has taken out Maduro. But on the ground in Venezuela, a lot of celebratory movement as well. A lot of the U.S. young people seem to not like much of anything that Donald Trump does, believe it or not. Puffy, the weed fish is a puffer fish. Arctic, heard a lot of aircraft last night. Maybe related. Okay, let's see what else we got here. No, I think that was a very good ad read. I say ad read, like our mods came up with these ads on their own. Let's see. I realized in my 40s, now in my 60s, that I look down at others and they behave like infants, says Norman Patterson. It's almost like we are unreasoning animals. Well, we are animals. All right. I can have only one wife, says Vladinak. Yeah, well, polygamy seems to be frowned upon by much of the world. I could see a situation in which there's like a movement that sort of becomes more like pro-poly relationships, but for the moment, polygamy seems to be largely frowned upon. All right. Okay, guys, it is late, so I'm gonna like cut this one short here because I got stuff I gotta still yet do tonight, and I didn't intend to be up this late, and all kinds of things like that. So I appreciate the work of our mods here on Land Speculation on YouTube. This has been an interesting and unexpected last 24 hours. Quiet Castle, Jeanette, James Games, I think, is lurking around here. The winner tonight is Norman Patterson. Congratulations, Norman Patterson. I should say congratulations, Norman Patterson. The top fans tonight, number 1, Lurky. Number 2, Calming the Chaos. Number 3, Spyman. Number 4, Norman Patterson. Number 5, Arctic Cockney. Number 6, Jerry Carter. 7, Villagenac. 8, Liberty Lover. Number 9, James Games. Number 10, Kobo Bunny Music. Number 11 Puffy the Weedfish. Number 12, Holly. 9679. Number 13, Marky. Number 14, Game Lab Studio. And it's number 15, MBK. So anybody I didn't greet out of that list, take your winnings and go forth and enjoy it. All right, guys, that's what we got for now. Obviously, much is going to continue to transpire around this whole thing. We will find out exactly what transpires in the coming days. It'll be very interesting. Maybe we have a new state on our hands, which is very exciting, and maybe we don't. Let's hope for the non-boondoggle option. And lots of cheap oil. All right. Well, that's about what we got, guys. Yeah, watch for new stuff coming out here soon. Tomorrow is the final day of the NFL season. And other stuff. Okay. Don't forget to like, subscribe, join our Discord, contribute to the Duck Fund. Check the description for that kind of stuff. Join our other channel, Land Ducks International channel. Hang out with our friends and affiliate channels. A lot of those are listed on the Discord. And other stuff. Whatever I'm forgetting to say. Have a good time with stuff. All right. Thanks for hanging out with us, guys. Don't be strangers. We'll be back. This is Lant, that ancient speculation. For now, I hope you all have a good night.